Hi, this is Astrid broadcasting to you from Hua Hin, Thailand. Today I have a really cool guest and his anon is Gigi. He is a well-known writer and programmer in the Bitcoin space and he recently got a new job at a new company, so we will obviously talk about that as well. Before we jump into the interview, I have a short message from our sponsor, holdbitcoin.org. Today, it's starting to seem like our society has come to a screeching halt. A world once booming with innovation, economic promise, and abundance has suddenly become one filled with materialism, division, and greed. It seems as though only a select few get to decide what is best for us anymore, and that only they get to reap the benefits. Luckily, there is hope, a revolution for the modern era, and it requires not a heartbeat out of rhythm, not a vocal cord strained, and not a fist thrown or a bullet fired. It challenges the entire system altogether. We believe that we can empower the individual again by moving to a system of money unlike anything we have ever seen before. A system based on 100% verifiable truth, built not just for your future but for that of your great-great-grandchildren. This move won't happen overnight and it's going to take all of us. If you are ready to take this step forward, visit holdbitcoin.org and learn how you can help change the world through a better money powered by the people. And for those already passionate Bitcoiners, help us spread the message by supporting Hold Bitcoin apparel or reach out at holdbitcoin.org/contact. So you're the first anonymous person I interview, but this is otherwise a common approach in the Bitcoin community, following in the steps of Satoshi Nakamoto. What were your main reasons for choosing an anon rather than your real name as an author and online influencer?
Great question right off the bat. It wasn't really too much of a conscious decision, I must say. I kind of slipped into it a little bit, but I think, I grew up on the internet and I very much like the idea of having multiple pseudonyms, and I think that identity is somewhat of a fluid concept in that sense. You have multiple identities. I like to say that identity is prismatic, like you're not the same person when you're with your grandparents or when you are at school or when you go to church maybe, or when you are, I don't know, with your best friends. So I think similarly, it's very hard to define just one identity online. And so I'm a huge fan of just having these kind of temporary almost identities online. And that's one of the reasons why I chose, when I got a little bit more well-known and people started to read my stuff, that I'm just gonna stick with my pseudonym and not use my real name. I hope that answers the question somewhat.
Yeah, does it also create a freedom from your past so that you can be anyone you choose at any time rather than identifying with your race, gender, and societal conditioning?
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that's one of the reasons, for example, why also Satoshi, you mentioned him when asking the question, chose to use a pseudonym, because it shouldn't be important who he is or who he was. And I think it's a very good way to disassociate yourself with your real identity or with your need space identity. And likewise, it's not too important what I did in the past, even though it's kind of known and I talked about it. And I think, that your real identity and your gender and other things shouldn't be important in the Bitcoin space. It's mainly about ideas and discussing those ideas. And so I really like that we currently in the Bitcoin discourse have a lot of pseudonymous actors, and we even have people that publish papers anonymously. Just some identities come out of nowhere, drop a paper, and disappear, never to be seen again. And I think that's a very nice feature. So I think you hit it spot on there.
And do you think that you will ever reveal who you are, your identity?
I don't have any plans, so it's not a big deal for me if it comes out. I'm not Satoshi or any. I'm not a very important person, So I'm not. I'm not using a pseudonym to hide my real identity first and foremost. I want to let people know that this is possible, and it might also be desirable. Like I don't think that privacy is that. I think when you kind of know what you're doing, and Satoshi is kind of proof of that, like nobody knows who he is. So it's kind of possible to do things privately and do big things privately as well. And I think it's the idea of selectively revealing yourself is a very important idea. And so I don't want to move to my real identity. And what's also funny is, like I've been in Bitcoin now for a couple of years, and people could care less about my real identity. Like I have this kind of new identity now, and also my reputation and my work is wedded to this identity and not to my legal identity, not to my legal name. And so this identity is kind of it took on a life on its own, and it is very important to me as well. So in a sense, and I wrote about this in the past, Gigi kind of is my real identity. Like that's who I am. It's just not my legal name. And like it's also funny because it's also my nickname, and everyone, including my mother and my wife and my bosses and ex-bosses, everyone calls me that. So it's kind of my real identity anyway. But I think for other pseudonymous actors in Bitcoin, I think it's very valuable that we have these pseudonymous characters that choose to not go with their legal name. And I think the opposite is also very important. Like we have Jack Dorsey, for example, we have Michael Saylor, we have very prominent figures with Robert Breedlove, which you interviewed as well. And they all use their real names, like their legal names, and put some weight behind what they are saying with everything that is associated with their legal names. So I think we kind of need both. And I think it's great that we have the whole spectrum of that.
Yeah, I agree. Congratulations to your new job at SeeTee. It sounds very exciting. What will your role there include?
Yeah, so a lot of people in Bitcoin actually don't know, but I'm a software engineer by training. So for the last 20 years, I've been coding and working on various software projects, and I've been leading various software teams. And so I have like professionally speaking, I have no past as an author or as a writer, but I was always a developer. And on SeeTee, I will doing similar things, but I always like to say, the last couple of years I've been writing words and code for Bitcoin, and so I will continue to do that and just see where I can be useful. It's still very early days for me at SeeTee. It's very early days for SeeTee in general, and I'm very honored and humbled that they decided to bring me on board. And as you can read in the shareholder letter, they have some big plans. So SeeTee as a company has some big plans, and I will try my best to be useful and make these plans a reality. And that's all I can say for now. But as is apparent in the shareholder letter, it's about getting into the mining business and also supporting the network and the ecosystem in general by also supporting open source development and all kinds of software solutions that are important for Bitcoin.
So what kind of projects can we expect to see from SeeTee in the future?
Yeah, it's a good question, and we're currently exploring all that. And one of the first developers that we brought on board now is Mr. Cooks from BTC Pay Server. And so BTC Pay Server is obviously a very important and like one of the most important Bitcoin projects in the ecosystem. And we try to select the projects and also the people and groups we want to support very carefully. And so far, Cooks is a great addition. He did awesome work in the past. And we expect that he will continue to do this awesome work for BTC Pay Server and possibly also other projects. So in Bitcoin, everything is developing quite quickly, obviously, and it's very hard to say where things are going in the next couple of years. This is one example of a software project that we think is very important and useful and worthy of support.
Do you think that any of the projects will be aimed at teenagers in any way?
It's another great question. I will bring that up for discussion. What would some of the projects be that you think are aiming at teenagers directly?
Perhaps. Maybe I'll come back to you on that question.
I mean, I don't know, like I'm a little bit older than you, and I'm not up to date anymore. But I remember like a couple of years ago, Snapchat was like the big app for teenagers. So what's currently the big like trending app? I guess what's it called? It used to be called Musical.ly. I guess it's now called TikTok, right?
Yeah.
I think TikTok is big. Right?
Yeah.
So
I would say
something like TikTok, but with micropayments embedded. You get paid for dancing.
So you have gotten a lot of good feedback on your article, Bitcoin is Time, and I listened to the audio version of it as preparation for this interview. And for me, it contained many difficult words and was quite difficult to understand. Do you think you could describe the message in that article in simpler terms for me and my listeners?
Yeah, I will try. I'm not surprised. Like I usually try to write in a way that can be understood by almost everyone, I hope. But it's very difficult. The more difficult the concepts get, the more big words you kind of have to use, because it gets very difficult to explain very, very simply. But in essence, what I was trying to say there is that one of the main problems that Bitcoin solves is how to tell the time in a decentralized system where you can't trust anybody. So if you're distributed all around the world, you need to have like one standard of time. And we humans, like we are very smart, and we have some scientists and big people that have built very precise clocks, and these clocks are all over the world, and they are all set to a certain time that we kind of agreed upon, we agree when the new year starts, we agree when midnight is, and all of this, of course, is related to the rotation of our Earth and to our solar system. So it's not set arbitrarily, but it's still like just setting the time and telling what time it is kind of a hard problem. And usually there is no problem with telling the time, because nobody really has an incentive to cheat you. Like they why would you lie to someone how late it is, unless you just want to be a bad person. But you don't have anything to gain from telling the wrong time. So in general, all these scientists and all these important people, and also all these large clocks like the Big Ben and also the atomic clocks, they all will tell you the right time. But in a system like Bitcoin, things are very different, because if you tell the wrong time, you might have a benefit. You can scam someone else out of their money. So, but just by telling the wrong time, you might be able to earn $10,000. So in a decentralized trustless system, you have a large incentive to cheat a little bit when it comes to time. And Bitcoin solves this problem by creating its own new sense of time, which works in a very complicated way, kind of, like it's not apparent in the first place that it is about telling the time, that proof of work actually builds up a steady progression which can be used as a clock. And so my very long article is about exactly that. And all participants in Bitcoin can agree on the block height, and you can understand the block height as the absolute time of the Bitcoin network, because you need time for all the transactions to be ordered, because you need to spend money and you need to receive money, and you can only spend the money which you got before, like you can't spend money that you will get in the future. That doesn't work, like you can't spend something that you don't have already. And so time is very, very important. The order of things is very important. And Bitcoin does exactly that. It orders things. So it tells you the absolute order of things. And the additional problem that we have in our universe is because of relativity, like the stuff that Einstein figured out. We don't have an absolute time in the first place. Like you often hear when people discuss Einstein that they will talk about space-time, and they will talk about how time is relative. And this is actually true, like a good example is GPS satellites. Like they whiz around the Earth very, very quickly. And the clocks in a GPS satellite, they run at a different rate than the clocks on our Earth do. And this is also true on Earth directly. And also the whole idea of an absolute time in the universe, it doesn't exist. If you look closely into it, you will realize that we don't have an absolute clock in our universe where everyone can agree, okay, this was the time at exactly that moment. It always depends on who is looking. It always depends on the observer and where the observer is. So Bitcoin solves this very physical problem in a very ingenious way. And I tried to pack all this in the article, and I hope that it helps some people at least to understand and appreciate Bitcoin more deeply.
And I think at some point you stated that if you tell the wrong time in Bitcoin, someone can steal it or smuggle it. How does that work?
Well, if you think about it in a very stupid way almost, if Bitcoin is nothing else but a ledger, like a list of who owes what to who. And so, for example, if we start out and we both have nothing, and I do something and I earn $10, let's say, now I have $10. And if I, let's say at 12 o'clock decide to give you $5 for something you did for me, at 12 o'clock going forward, I have $5 and you have $5. And if you imagine a list where this is put in, you will write 12 o'clock, okay, I transferred $5 to you. And so if you go to someone else and if you were able to jump forward or backward in time, you can either make up money or lose money. Like if you would turn back the time, you would lose your $10, or you would lose your $5. So and if you know that this transaction would happen, for example, and you would be able to time travel forward, you could snap with your fingers and suddenly you have dollars out of nowhere. Like that's what I mean with how if you cheat with the time, you can make money appear or disappear. And that's a problem that Bitcoin needs to solve, because if a transaction happens and like half of the network knows that it happened, but the other half of the network believes some wrong time, and let's say it's 1 hour earlier, then the whole balances don't match up. Like people that in some other reality, so to speak, in some other time would have gained money already. This money would just disappear just because the time is wrong. And that's a very, very difficult problem to solve, like because we live in this very weird universe where we don't have an absolute time. But it's also very difficult to understand, because it feels like we have an absolute time, because like you look at the time and there it is, and that's how late it is. But as Einstein has shown us, that it's not exactly right. It's just that the differences are so small that they don't really matter for us humans, but for computers they absolutely do matter. So the differences that we're talking about on Earth, they're around 50 milliseconds. That's how long it takes for light to travel from one place to another. So everything that happens inside these 50 milliseconds, it's impossible for computers to figure out kind of what the global time on Earth is. And that's another problem that Bitcoin solves, and a lot of people don't know that.
Oh, wow.
I hope that answered the question somewhat, but I think the main idea is, like if you jump forward and backward in time, then the balances change of how much money you have.
Yeah, I find it very interesting. In the article, you also spoke about the difference between physical and digital tokens, and that physical tokens can be like handed between people and that they can't be copied, whilst digital tokens can be easily copied in great detail. And now that NFTs are becoming popular, have they found a way to make sure that people do not copy the original?
The short answer is no. That's also why NFTs don't really work. Like they don't work is kind of unfair for NFTs because the people that sell NFTs, they will actually tell you what they do, and NFTs are doing that. So what's happening in the NFT world is if you have a piece of digital art, but it doesn't even need to be art, like it can be a digital anything, you create something that might be best understood as a certificate. Like if you trade real art, like that might be the wrong word, but if you trade physical art, like a painting or a statue or what have you, if you get it from an official place, from an official dealer, you will get a certificate of authenticity, that this is actually a piece that the artist has created and it was purchased at this date for that price and it is part of this collection and so on and so forth. And in the art world, this certificate is very important. You know, like you want to have proof that it is an authentic piece. And so in the NFT world, if you have like a JPEG, for example, so a meme or an image of whatever, like a digital piece of art, the digital piece of art is not scarce. So you can copy that indefinitely, and you can also copy it perfectly. Like whoever copy and pasted something in a Word document or copy and pasted a file on a USB stick, these copies are perfect. So if you create a JPEG file and you publish it online on the internet, everyone who can see it can also copy it. The problem that NFTs solves, they don't solve digital scarcity. Like everything that is digital can be copied always. And this is also true for Bitcoin. It's just in Bitcoin, the copies become useless. And for NFTs, the copies of the art piece, they don't become useless. It's just as pretty, you know, like if you have this JPEG, you can copy it and it's still pretty. It's still the same. It's exactly the same. It's a perfect replication. Like it's a perfect replica. You can't even tell what is the original and what is the copy. And that's what's different from the physical world. Like in the physical world, you might be able to replicate something very, very well, but you still have, you can still distinguish what was the original and what is the copy. That's just the nature of how our physical world works and how information works. And so the whole hype about NFTs is about this certificate. So when you're buying an NFT, you're buying the certificate. It's nothing but a hash of the digital artwork that you're purchasing. And it's this certificate that you then can also trade and pass on to other people. But the certificate is also, it's removed from the artwork. So it's a different thing. And they might be linked, but this link can always be broken. You know, like it's, if you have an NFT and all the copies of the JPEG, for example, are vanished from the internet, then you still might have this NFT and the original artwork doesn't exist anymore. So I would just caution everyone who is participating in the NFT craze that is currently going on. And I would also like to point out that this is not a new concept by any stretch of the imagination. Like NFTs have existed on Bitcoin since, I think, like 2013 at least, or something like that. So anyone who wants to look into this can look into color coins and, for example, Rare Pepes. Rare Pepes was one of the first NFT craze on Bitcoin. And this was in like, I think 2014 or something like that.
And the Bitclout social network is built on a similar idea. Is this something you're planning to be involved with? And do you think it can replace Twitter in the future?
I hope that something replaces Twitter in the future, but I think Bitclout isn't it. I don't want to participate in anything like that. I think the concept is broken in the first place. I don't think it solves anything really, and I think having a marketplace for reputation is also kind of a dangerous thing. But I'm very hopeful that since you mentioned the replacement of Twitter, I'm very hopeful that something new will pop up that solves some of the problems that Twitter has. And I think Twitter has a problem with centralization and censorship and just filtering in general, that it becomes more and more difficult to figure out what you are allowed to say and what is off limits. So people get banned once they say the wrong thing. Like you tweet a wrong thought and then you're suddenly suspended for like 2 weeks or you're banned outright. And I think that's very dangerous. And I hope that new systems will spring up that don't have this problem.
In your recent interview with Peter McCormack, you talked about how learning about Bitcoin takes 4 years. Is that how long it took for you to understand?
Yeah, I think Peter said that the first lesson in Bitcoin will take you 4 years to learn. And I think it's different for different people. There are some people that are very quick to understand Bitcoin because they are pre-exposed to certain ideas and are just very quick learners. And I think Michael Saylor is one example. Some other examples would be Michael Goldstein and Pierre Rochard, for example. They understood Bitcoin very quickly. Hal Finney is also one example. Some people even think that he's Satoshi. I personally don't think that he is, but he understood Bitcoin like in a week. You know, like the after Bitcoin was launched and the white paper was released, it took him like a couple of weeks tops, and he was writing already about how valuable Bitcoin will be in the future and the emergence of Bitcoin banks and other things. So he obviously thought about money and decentralized systems very deeply, even before Bitcoin came on the scene. And I think if you have a deep understanding of money and decentralized systems and maybe even Austrian economics and things like that, then it might be possible to understand Bitcoin very quickly. But for mere mortals like you and I, it oftentimes takes a little bit longer. For me, it took, I don't know, it took many years, and I made all the mistakes. You know, I thought that Bitcoin was all technology. I thought it was just technology. I didn't realize that it was about money, and it took me many years to appreciate it and understand it properly. And I think Bitcoin also changes all the time, so it's very hard to have a solidified understanding in a way. I think you need to update your understanding periodically. We think of Bitcoin now as, for example, mostly as a store of value and something that companies and people put on their balance sheet, and as a very safe way to save, and as something that is a hedge to inflation. And I think in 5 years' time, we will think differently about Bitcoin, just like we thought differently about Bitcoin 5 years ago. So I think it will change.
I wonder how long it's going to take for me to understand. You have also said that all fiat money is doomed. What do you mean by this, and how long until they are?
So the average lifespan of fiat money is very short, actually. I think it's something like 20 years, you know, like if you take all the fiat monies in the world and historically, most fiat monies get replaced or die because of inflation and eventual hyperinflation. And I think the average lifespan of global currencies is like 100 years, and the dollar is a little bit over 100 years old now. So I think it's you know in its final stage, the US dollar, and the British pound was before that, for example. And like we have some currencies that were used globally, and they like those currency empires, they can last for 100 years. Like historically, that has been true. How long it will take is very difficult to say. It's always difficult to say. Like people have been talking about the death of the dollar for a very long time. Like all the gold bugs, everyone who is into gold will tell you that it's the last days for the dollar, and they've been telling us that for like 40 years at least. So I think Bitcoin accelerates the death of fiat currencies just because there is an exit. So we see this already in countries where the fiat currencies are really bad. So countries that go through hyperinflation or just heavy inflationary periods right now, a lot of people will opt for different ways to store their wealth, and Bitcoin is one of those ways. And the reason why fiat currencies are all doomed to fail, and like the end state of every fiat currency is death, basically, is because it's an unnatural thing and it doesn't cost anything to produce. And in general, all goods kind of tend towards the cost of production. Like people cost a certain amount. It doesn't matter how you measure it, if you measure it in dollar or in Bitcoin terms, or in time that is needed for humans to produce that thing, or even if you measure it in energy. The harder something is to make, the more expensive it will be. And it's not hard to make fiat money. So the fair value of fiat money is zero, basically. Like currently, like writing something on a piece of paper, it doesn't take that much work. Photocopying something, it doesn't take that much work. And it even worse now, like just changing a 0 to a 1 in the database, it doesn't take that much work. So that's why fiat monies are doomed. And you can think about this differently as well. If you would have a money printer, like an official government money printer in your basement, you would probably use it. And even if you say, no, I'm such a great person, like I have so high moral standards, I would never use it. There will come a situation in the future. Maybe you get a little bit older, or maybe maybe now, like you really need money for something. Someone in your family is sick, and the only way to save them is spending $50,000 for a doctor or for medicine or what have you. And nobody has this money, but you have this money printer in your basement. You would go down to the basement and print those $50,000 like without a second thought. And in the grand scheme of things, $50,000 is not that much money compared to all the money there is in the world. And that's exactly what governments are doing. So if you have the possibility to create money out of thin air, you will make use of this power. You will abuse this power. And that has been historically true always, because it's just the nature of human beings, and there will always be situations where it makes sense to do that, like the example I just made up. And for nation states, those examples historically have been wars or other large tragedies. And currently it's the COVID crisis, of course, like governments say we can only make it out of this mess by printing trillions and trillions of dollars. And so that's what they do. And of course, if you inflate the money supply, the value of the money goes down, because there's just, like everything that is there in abundance, like, leaves on the trees and sand on the beach, it's worth nothing. And that's why all fiat monies are doomed to fail, because that's true for all fiat monies. You can create them out of thin air.
Oh, wow. That's very interesting. So, thank you. This is all the questions I have for today. I will include your Twitter handle and website in the description. Is there anything else you want to add, or any place you want to direct teenagers before we finish?
No, that was great. Thanks for having me. I don't have anything to add, I think. Everyone who's interested in Bitcoin, just keep digging, keep asking questions. It's a very interesting and important phenomenon. And I think, if you're young, like you and your listeners are, I think it's even easier to understand than for most people that are a little bit older. Like, especially, like if you're 50, 60 plus, like a lot of the bankers of this world, I don't think they will ever understand Bitcoin properly. So I'm very, very hopeful for the future that people like you, Astrid, and your listeners will understand Bitcoin both quickly and deeply, and I hope that you're all going to do great things with it.
I hope so too.